So, you think you've got what it takes?
Hello boys and girls, I'm TheFlyingTeaCup, and for those who have been watching me for a while know that I'm really into the lore and story of Titanfall, and I've made lots of videos regarding the narrative of the series. If this is the first video you watch of me, then some things might be a little bit confusing, but I will try my best to explain what I mean and how it all connects together. This video is a mix of speculation and confirmed facts about the world of Apex Legends, and it's meant to give you context of the world and the origin of the games. Furthermore, what led up to the deadly Bloodsport's beginning. But now you might be asking, why did he open up with the fact that he's really invested in the Titanfall lore? Don't worry, I'll get there, because as Respawn said themselves, Apex Legends does take place in the same universe as the Titanfall franchise. In fact, it takes place a few years after Titanfall 2. If you're already caught up on the story of Titanfall, then please jump to the timestamp on the screen. If you want a very fast and brief explanation of the world, then keep watching. So the story of Titanfall begins with the Interstellar Manufacturing Corporation, also known as the IMC, who discovered a collection of inhabitable planets which they called the Frontier. They sent masses of people to inhabit these planets and work for them and exploit the planets for resources to later deliver them to the core system. What the core system is has not been confirmed, but it's speculated to be Earth. This went on for multiple years. Eventually the IMC and the core system lost interest in the Frontier and left it to itself. Years later they returned, and the remaining colonists did not appreciate them assuming control once again and demanding resources, which forced them to respond aggressively and form the Frontier Militia, also known as just the Militia. This conflict carried on for years on end, and with time the Militia gained more and more ground. If you want a more detailed explanation of the Frontier conflict, then watch TF Legends video on the game's story from the beginning of the first game to the end of the second game. For even more detailed information on smaller factors on the Frontier conflict, check out the Advocate Network. Even if you're a veteran, I suggest you check them out. You might learn a new thing or two. Or just do the most rational thing, buy Titanfall 2. So onto what this video is about. The first taste of the story in Apex Legends is this image on the game's webpage, which says the following. The Frontier War is over. After hundreds of years of conflict between the Interstellar Manufacturing Corporation and the militia founded to fight them, the far-off region of space known as the Frontier can finally know peace. But liberation comes at a cost. When the IMC and the militia departed, they took everything of value and left the Frontier in disarray. With no way to support themselves, the people of the Frontier had no choice but to leave their homes. The brave relocation to the Outlands, a remote cluster of planets on the fringes of the Frontier. The Outlands are untouched by war and teeming with resources and opportunity. But life is cheap here, and danger lurks around every corner. Its pioneers, explorers, and outlaws used to spend their lives locked in an endless power struggle. Now they settle their differences in the Apex games, a blood sport with legends all across the Frontier compete for money, fame, and glory. So what we can gather from this is that the conflict in Titanfall 1 and 2 is now over, and the people are leaving the broken down Frontier and are forced to move to the dangerous Outlands. Now it's said by Respawn themselves that Apex Legends takes place roughly 30 years after Titanfall 2's campaign, which means that it's not exactly known when the war ended and when the Outlands started the Apex games. With this information I was pretty bummed out, and I thought that this was the only story that they put in the game, and it pretty much shut down any possibility to expand Titanfall story. But oh my, how wrong I was. If you played Apex Legends, you have most likely seen this trailer. With it comes a few more clues to what happened and what led up to this. Let's address the elephant in the room. This guy right here is Cuban Blisk, a well-known mercenary and leader of the Apex Predators, a mercenary group from the Titanfall franchise who has been a huge part of the Frontier War. I'll get back to why he is important and not just a fun reference for all Titanfall fans in just a moment. Trust me, he will be important. The biggest clue is actually the thing that is the most difficult to see and that most of you probably haven't found. This newspaper that Blisk stabs with his knives provide a lot of information and background to what has happened. Now, because of the quality of the cutscene and Blisk stabs, not everything can be read, but from what I've gathered, the top part of the page gives us a short recap of what happened between Titanfall 2 and Apex Legends. It's also revealed at the bottom of the page that our Season 1 is actually the 124th season in the Outlands, which will be very important later. The lower part of the page reveals other details that otherwise wouldn't be so obvious and apparent by just playing the game, such as the King's Canyon is a 30-year-old IMC Thunderdome that has been rebuilt. It also reveals that the last Thunderdome was rebuilt on Solens, which is the same planet that Mirage and Gibraltar comes from. Here you can also read about two new legends that will join the game called Octavio Silva and Natalie Paquette. As a recording of this video, only Octavio Silva has been confirmed to be the character Octane, but Natalie is not confirmed yet, but it's predicted to be Watson and will hopefully come at a later stage in Season 1. Now this will be important, so keep this segment of the newspaper in mind. But onto the most important part of the page, the top. Now I couldn't read the entirety of the top section due to the blurriness of the page. Luckily, these two paragraphs are just enough to piece together what is going on. This is what the two paragraphs said. Now they are incomplete because I couldn't translate everything, but you are free to pause the video and read through yourself. So what does this all mean? Well, apparently before or during the war, the Outlands were under IMC control, but was later abandoned to most likely aid the IMC forces on the frontier, which left the Outlands in total chaos. When the war was over, the frontier was inhabitable and forces the remaining population to move to the Outlands. This created even more problems with the already problematic Outlands with a huge wave of refugees. But just as the newspaper says, there wasn't just civilians that moved, but also mercenaries that were now out of jobs. I guess it's now that we move into speculations, so take this with a grain of salt. So why do I say that there wasn't just innocent civilians that moved, but also mercenaries? It comes from the fact that the newspaper says the surviving frontier civilians and the mercenary syndicate. The fact that they separate the civilian and the mercenary syndicate makes it clear that these are two entities that should be referred individually. Even if the word syndicate by definition means a group of individuals or organizations combined to promote a common interest, syndicate in this context is actually an organization and not just a group of mercenaries. This becomes clearer in the lower part of the page where it's told that the organization, the Syndicate, is the organization that created and is in charge of the Apex games. So why is this important to separate them? Well, something that might not be so apparent about the militia from Titanfall is that they're not just a group of freedom fighters and brave rebels. They are, at the core, a group of criminals, outlaws and mercenaries. And as stated in the post on Apex's website, they were founded to fight the IMC, but now when they're gone, the militia has no need to exist anymore. And like all the other frontier civilians, they too need somewhere to live. And finally, it's here that Blisk comes into the scene. So for those who have played Titanfall 2, you know that he's always looking for a paycheck as the leader of one of the best mercenary groups on the frontier, known as the Apex Predators. As the newspaper puts it, it seems like the Syndicate made the Apex games to get some cash in while in the process painting themselves as the good guys. If you think about it, now when the Frontier War is over, the IMC have no use to hire the Apex Predators and likewise for the Frontier Militia, which leaves them without work. So with that assumption, the likelihood that Blisk either attended as a legend early on or is associated with the Syndicate and or a part of them is more than likely, especially with this gesture which is meant as an invitation to the Apex games. To what role or part of the games is unknown. Even if he's not confirmed to be an old participant or one of the game's creators, this proves that he's at least affiliated with the Syndicate in one way or another. Okay, so based on this we know why the Apex game started and what led up to it. A refugee crisis that gave mercenaries a chance to restore balance and order on their own terms by letting people fight each other to the death and sending it on live television to earn a quick buck. But for how long has this going on for? Even though it's not clearly stated in the newspaper anywhere, there's a few things that could potentially expose the truth. As I mentioned earlier, on the lower part of the front page there's an image that says with big bold letters, "The Apex Games 124th season begins next month." Now why is this relevant? Well, as the newspaper said, the Dark came to a gradual end with the great migration of the surviving frontier civilians and the mercenary syndicate who took it upon themselves to restore life and order on the Outlands in return of profit. Which in this case means that the Syndicate created the games shortly after the migration from the frontier started. And now when we know that the season where the character Octavio and Natalie is the 124th season, we can count backwards to reveal for how long the game has been going on for. Now as we know, Octavio Silva's in-game name is Octane, and Natalie's is not yet confirmed while this video is in production, but it's presumed to be Watson. Which in that sense confirms that our season 1 in the real world is the 124th season in the Titanfall universe. And if we can figure out for how long a season in-game is, we can figure out when the big frontier refugees crisis started. Now take this with a huge grain of salt, because this is not set in stone anywhere. But if we were to assume that a season of Apex games in the Titanfall universe lasts for as long as a season in our universe, then that would mean that a season lasts for roughly 3 months at a time. With this, we can figure out that the game has been live for about 3.5 years if the season starts directly after one another. But here's when things gets a little bit spicy. In Bangalore's backstory, it's revealed that 3 years ago, she and one of her brothers were sent to the Outlands to retrieve a group of mercenaries to aid the IMC in hope to fight the militia, but they were sadly ambushed and she was the only survivor. So, what's so spicy about this? The point I want to amplify is the fact that it says to aid the IMC's fight against the militia. Now, when the former frontier population that has been on the militia side has moved to the Outlands and the IMC has abandoned it, it would mean that the Outland is now dominated by the militia. Even if they're not officially active, I would guess that they are on the watch for IMC forces that tries to invade in reduced numbers compared to before. So what I'm trying to get at is that we assume that each season starts directly after one another, which would calculate roughly to 3.5 years. But this happened 3 years ago, and most likely the season doesn't start directly after one another, which means that the militia and the IMC are probably active, still fighting, but not on the frontier anymore. So with a cluster of information, what am I trying to say? Well, even if the war is said to be over, there's still a conflict between the IMC and the frontier citizens. Saying that the frontier war is over probably could mean that the war has moved on to another place that is not the frontier. Vince Pella, the CEO of Respawn, has said that there will be some Titanfall news later on in the year, so maybe we will learn more. But for all Titanfall fanatics out there, I don't think you need to worry about the franchise being slaughtered by Apex. And for all the Apex players out there, if you really like Apex, pick up Titanfall 2 and try it out. It's really cheap and it's often on sale, and I'll promise you, you will like it. But with that said, thanks for watching and take care.